President Obama's second-term cabinet is almost complete. He took a while to get going on second-term nominations. We were weeks into his first term before he nominated anybody. But now the cabinet is actually filling up. Earlier today, the president nominated 3 people to cabinet-level positions. First, he nominated Sylvia Matthews Burwell to run the very important Office of Management and Budget, OMB to its friends. She's currently the head of the Walmart Foundation. Then the president nominated a nuclear scientist with amazing hair named Ernest Moniz to run the Department of Energy. He will replace his fellow physicist, Nobel Prize winner Stephen Chu. And then Gina McCarthy. The president nominated her to run the Environmental Protection Agency. Gina McCarthy is currently a deputy at the agency. At EPA, she heads up the Office of Air and Radiation, because that's one office. In the last few years, she has made quite a splash. She helped write new pollution rules related to lung-killing things like soot and mercury. Power plants spit that stuff into the air, and it was Gina McCarthy's job to say, hey, let's do that less. Not to overgeneralize, but environmental groups at least seem to be pretty happy with an EPA pick like Gina McCarthy, which means environmental groups had a much better Monday than they did a weekend. And that's because of what happened in the Friday afternoon news dump. At 3:30 p.m. Eastern on Friday, or as most people call it, 90 minutes till the weekend o'clock, somebody at the State Department decided it was time to release that department's long-awaited news that they figured would upset a lot of people. It goes without saying that if you want something to get a lot of attention, if you want the media to pay attention to it, you want stories and blog posts and TV show segments about it, release it on like a Monday morning. But if you want something buried, we suggest the later in the day hours on a Friday, like the State Department did with their report on this big pipeline, which would bring tar sands oil into the United States from Canada. Hence the need for the State Department to be involved since it crosses a border. It's an international matter. The pipeline crosses the border at Montana and then runs clear down to the bottom of Nebraska. For this pipeline, there is the meta-environmental issue of whether or not tar sands oil is the future that we want, given the global warming consequences. But also there's the less meta-environmental issue, which is all about the land this pipeline runs through. All those ranch lands and those freshwater aquifers and lakes and homes. Honestly, we do not have great technology to clean up normal oil spills, but tar sands oil spills, we really do not know how to clean those up. That was the problem with the big, disastrous Kalamazoo River oil spill 2.5 years ago, because tar sands oil, it turns out, is harder to clean up. We're bad at all oil spill cleanup, but we are really bad at tar sands oil cleanups because we don't know how to do it. So what happens if and when something goes wrong? The State Department and ultimately the president will have to consider those kinds of questions when they make a decision on whether or not to sign off on construction of the Keystone pipeline. Now, the pipeline, of course, has its boosters. Republicans tried to make it an issue during the election against the president because he had not approved the pipeline. But it's also easy to find people opposed to this thing, both locally, where the pipeline is supposed to go, and nationally. In August 2011, there were 2 weeks of anti-Keystone protests. Protesters doing civil disobedience outside the White House. 2 weeks, more than 1,000 people arrested. 2 months after that, anti-Keystone protests in San Diego, California. A month after that, November 2011, a big protest outside the White House. Thousands of people at the White House gates. November 2012, protests in Texas. And more protests in Washington, D.C. December 2012, activists climb into the pipeline and blockade themselves inside it. January, the start of this year, anti-pipeline protesters in Massachusetts, Wisconsin, and Texas occupy the offices of the company that is building the pipeline. The following month, February, more protests in Texas and in California. That's San Diego, California you're looking at. And then also last month, big protest in Washington, D.C. This was a large protest. Organizers claim there were tens of thousands of protesters there. There has been a lot of protest overall, including a lot of civil disobedience on this issue. Activists say more than 1,500 people have been arrested protesting the pipeline in less than 2 years. And so then on Friday at 3:30 p.m. Eastern, at almost time to go home o'clock, the State Department released its environmental impact report on the pipeline. And according to the report, the pipeline won't have too much of an impact. It won't have too much of an impact on the environment, or at least seemingly it won't have enough of an impact to warrant the State Department scuttling the deal on those grounds. Environmental groups, as you might imagine, are not psyched. The State Department will be taking comments on the pipeline on whether you think it should be approved or not for the next 45 days. The environmental group 350.org says they are still training more people in civil disobedience techniques, which means I expect we will be seeing more of this kind of thing over the next few weeks and months.